Amilcare. Can you get a last name for me?
It is June 4th. I guess for the record, I'll note that our chair and our vice chair are both absent this evening, and I was assigned the task of chairing the meeting tonight. So please bear with me as we go through this process. I think what we'll do is, why don't we, since we have quite a few people here, why don't we go ahead and get right into the public hearing, and we'll save the approval of the minutes from the last time to the end of the meeting. This is a public hearing this evening for a variance application, LUP 2014-0011 for 840 Residence Street, and we'll turn the time over to staff for a presentation.
Good evening. Before you tonight is a variance request for a parcel at 840 Residence Street. Before I get started, I'd like to begin with some background information on the subject property and a previous variance that was requested in 2012. The former property owner requested a variance to waive the requirement that every lot shall abut a public street right-of-way for a minimum distance of 40 feet to enable permitting of a single-family dwelling. This application was denied by the Board of Adjustment on August 9th, 2012, and the applicant requested an appeal, and the application was subsequently approved by City Council on September 4th, 2012, with the following two conditions: that the subject property be limited to a single-family dwelling to be located in the southeast corner, and that the applicant be required to permanently pave the existing 20-foot wide alley right-of-way from the point of transition from the existing 60-foot Residence Street right-of-way westward to the western boundary of the future driveway to serve a single-family dwelling upon the subject property. The variance approval from 2012 has since expired, pursuant to Chapter 8 of Moscow Zoning Code, that states that if a building permit or occupancy permit pertaining to the variance is not obtained for the subject property within 1 year from the date of the Board of Adjustment's final decision, such variance shall be immediately revoked and shall be automatically null and void. So since the approval in September of 2012, there was not a building permit pulled for the property. Therefore, we are here tonight for you to review a variance request at 840 Residence Street to waive the requirement that every lot shall abut a public street right-of-way other than an alley for a minimum distance of 40 feet to enable permitting of a two-family dwelling. Real quickly, I'd like to go over the provisions within the code regarding non-conforming lots. A non-conforming lot is a lot that is existing at the date of the adoption of the zoning code, was previously approved by the city, but that fails to meet requirements for lot area or width, or both. On such non-conforming lots, a single-family dwelling and the associated accessory buildings may be permitted without a variance, even though they don't meet the lot area or the lot width. The subject property does meet the lot area and width requirements for the zone that it's located in, and therefore is not considered a non-conforming lot that would otherwise already be eligible for a single-family dwelling without a variance. So therefore, the subject property requires a variance in order for the lot to be buildable, since it does not abut a public street right-of-way other than an alley. The subject property is a 21,087 square foot parcel located on a portion of the Residence Street alley that is 20 feet wide. The former owner inherited the parcel, and this property is one of the last remaining parcels of one of the early homesteaders in Moscow. The Residence Street right-of-way, approximately 118 feet to the east of the subject property, is 60 feet in width. And from the western terminus of this right-of-way, the plot turns into a 20-foot wide alley right-of-way, extending to the west, and then turning southwest, and then turning to the south, eventually connecting to C Street. The alley right-of-way is mostly undeveloped, adjacent to Residence Street, and partially developed in proximity to C Street, and you'll see that in a moment. The subject property is outlined here in red. The 60-foot right-of-way of Residence Street, you can see ends right here. And then the 20-foot wide alley comes this way to the west, turns down southwest, and then south, connecting to C Street. This is a plot map that was dated 1927 that shows that this subject property here was plotted at that date in 1927, and the 20-foot wide alley that's existing there today was also plotted that way at that time. The subject property is located within the medium-density residential R3 zone. In the R3 zone, single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, townhouses, and twin homes are all permitted principal uses. The properties to the east, south, and west are also located within the R3 zone, and properties to the north are located within the moderate-density single-family zone R2. Here's a map showing the subject property zoning and surrounding property zoning. The 21,000 approximate square foot parcel is currently vacant and undeveloped. There is approximately 166 feet of property frontage that is along the Resident Street alley, with its only access being the alleyway. The alley right-of-way is partially paved from the western terminus of the Resident Street right-of-way towards the subject property, but the pavement ends before reaching the southeast corner of the property. The property is constrained by steep slopes, making it challenging to develop on portions of the lot. There's approximately 40% slopes in the center and 15% slopes in the southeast corner. And here's an image showing the topography of the lot. As is typical with all variance requests, we route the proposal to the various departments within the city for input on the proposal. From the fire department, the fire marshal determined that the 20-foot Resident Street alley right-of-way width is sufficient for a fire apparatus access road to a two-family dwelling on the subject property, as long as the 20-foot width is maintained and paved westward from the Resident Street right-of-way to the western boundary of the future driveway. The Public Works Department concluded that there was no public safety issues with permitting construction of a two-family dwelling, and also supports the fire marshal's recommendation to pave the right-of-way and extend it to the edge of the future driveway. The City of Moscow sanitation manager indicated that access to the site for refuse collection is not anticipated to be an issue. Refuse collection occurs currently west of the 60-foot right-of-way and within the narrow 20-foot alleyway. This is the proposed site plan that was submitted by the applicant. The proposed building footprint meets all other zoning requirements, including setbacks and off-street parking. There are 2 spaces required per dwelling, and they're meeting that by providing a one-car garage for each unit and then a space in front of the garage for each unit. You can see the 20-foot alley here, and the applicant has indicated the new area that would be paved to the west edge of the driveway. Some photos of the lot. Those of you who haven't seen it, this image was taken where I've got the yellow circle there, and you can see this is where the pavement ends, and it's not quite at the subject property yet. This is just taking a few steps forward. This would be about in the center of the public right-of-way looking west. And then again, just continuing down that public right-of-way to the southwest. This is the property looking towards the northwest from the highest point on the property. And this is at the intersection of Sunset and Residence looking to the west. This is this area here has the 60-foot right-of-way width. Chapter 2 of the Comprehensive Plan, Land Use and Community Character, designates the subject property as neighborhood conservation. Neighborhood conservation areas are intended to preserve the character of many of the city's existing residential neighborhoods. And Chapter 3, Community Mobility, identifies Resident Street and C Street as local neighborhood streets. The staff's recommendation tonight is to conduct a public hearing and consider any testimony presented, as well as the relevant criteria and standards for approval and denial of a variance. And then the staff's recommendation is to approve the variance request with the following 3 conditions. You'll note that in the board's packet, there was only 2 recommended conditions. Based on phone calls from neighbors earlier this week, we have added a 3rd condition after understanding that there was some discrepancy in where the actual property line is located. And so therefore, to alleviate some issues there, we've added a 3rd condition. The conditions are as follows: that development of the subject property be limited to 1 2-family dwelling to be located in the southeast corner of the subject property, that the applicant shall demonstrate the required 20-foot clear width of the residence street alley right-of-way is provided for, and that the applicant be required to make any improvements necessary to maintain the 20-foot wide access. And finally, that the applicant shall be required to permanently pave the existing 20-foot wide alley right-of-way from the point of transition from the existing 60-foot residence street right-of-way westward to the western boundary of the future driveway. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Rebecca?
Not this time.
So am I to understand the principal difference between what we dealt with a couple of years ago and tonight is we've gone from a 1-family dwelling to a 2-family dwelling? Is that
That's correct.
what I saw? Okay. I thought that was the case, but I thought I'd double check. Linda, anything, Marshall?
Oh, no. Let's hear from the people who have come.
Good. Well, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. There's quite a few of us here tonight. We'd ask you to be brief and to the point, and please come forward. And we'll also ask you to state your name and address for the record. Oh, yeah, and the applicant, if the applicant would like to come up first, we'll invite you to be first.
I appreciate the opportunity to address the board. Thank you as well for considering our variance request. My name is Rod Story. I'm here with my wife, Jenny. We are property owners as of about a month and a half ago of this property that's in question. We're also neighbors to the property. We live at 906 West C Street that adjoins the piece of property to the west. It's the longest border of the property. We lived in the neighborhood for 5 years, and we plan to live for many more. As I mentioned, the property that we live on adjoins the property, and it has the largest border. Because of this shared border, we naturally have a strong interest in the proposed property and its development. We purchased the property in part to ensure that it would maintain its wooded feel. We also purchased the property in order to build a home so that my wife's aging parents could live alongside us. We love this neighborhood. Notably, it is a very mixed neighborhood, with residence, street forming one border between an R2 and an R3 zoning range. This lot in particular is an R3 lot, as has been described. Many of the homes in this neighborhood are single-family units, particularly on Sunset, but many are duplexes and quadplexes, particularly on Resident Street. It is our desire to see that this neighborhood be revitalized, and we believe our development would be a step in the right direction. We believe that our building plan is consistent with the best interests and the best aspects of this neighborhood. We're aware of the concerns that will be raised by some of our neighbors that also were raised at the last variance. I understand that the owner of the property was not available for comment or to state his case at that time. We have taken the opportunity to meet most of our neighbors and to personally share our plans with them. We've also taken measures to ensure that this project is done well. This includes having the land properly surveyed to ensure that the building site is actually feasible, which we've confirmed. We've used a local property manager, a project manager named Rimrock Development. You may be familiar. We also are employing a local contractor who you'll hear from tonight, Austin Anderson, who actually also lives in our neighborhood. The site plan has been discussed in detail with the city engineer, the fire department, to make sure that it is appropriate and that the setbacks are appropriate, the utilities that need access are appropriate, and it has been confirmed. We have a site plan, and it has a small footprint. Also, we know that parking is an issue on this end of Resident Street. Because of that, our building plan includes garages, and it includes adequate off-street parking. Again, I want to thank you for considering this variance. I know it's a second time through. We are local owners, and we're also the primary neighbors of this property. We believe that we have properly addressed the feasibility issues that a duplex requires for this site plan. We're requesting it for two reasons. We're needing living space for our grandparents. We're also needing an opportunity to finance the building of it, and we believe we can do that best through a two-family home. Notably, this duplex would actually join many others that are already on Residence Street. However, we're choosing to construct ours in a way that is not a college rental. Our duplex is going to be very visually appealing. We believe that it will enhance the value of both Sunset Drive and Residence Street neighborhoods. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Story?
Not right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Story, did you say your developer was here and was going to draw? Okay, we'll go ahead and hear from you.
My name is Austin Anderson. I'm a contractor. I own Anderson Family Construction, LLC. I'm actually the one that filled out the request for the variance for the stories due to my familiarity with the city and how that process works. Obviously, I have a fiscal interest in this project because I'll be building the duplex, but I live on 227 North Llewellyn Street. So I live in the neighborhood. I used to live on Residence Street and rent one of the duplexes up there, and I plan on staying in that neighborhood long term, owning property there. And I too would like to see it, the neighborhood as a whole improved and beautified, and to keep the small town feel that Moscow has by creating properties where people will want to rent them and to take care of them, and something like the stories where the owners live next door. They're going to keep a close eye on things. They're not going to let it get run down like some of the property management companies do in town. And I think that it doesn't do anybody any good to have a vacant lot sitting there. It's not generating revenue for the city through property taxes. It also is not being used for anything. It's just growing weeds at this point. It's not being maintained. Really the only use it serves is a spot to look out into the fields. So I would like to see it developed in a smart way that's going to look nice and be an improvement in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Anderson?
No.
Thank you. We'll take any other testimony at this time. If you would, again, come forward and please state your name and your address, and we'd ask you to keep it brief and to the point.
Make it clear that it's for or against.
I may need some assistance to get this up, but I have it illustrated. I think this is going to do it. Okay, I also have this for committee. It's brief, but this you can see. I'm Christine Moffett. I've been a resident at 419 Sunset Drive for 34 years, and I also own a duplex on Residence Street, 725, 723 duplex, which I have improved over the years. Here we are again. It's almost 2 years that we had a hearing on a similar proposal of the same property. The neighbors at that time brought out a number of issues, but perhaps I look at it as an optimistic thing that now we have another chance to maybe do a better job in presenting our case of why we're not against development at all, but we see some particularly germane and important things that need to be addressed with this development. So you've all seen the location of the property here. Just to point out, there. This is my home right there, and the property line is wrong, as I'm actually an adjacent property owner. The property that I own, oops, what am I doing? There, it goes down in a pie shape there. I want to present to you some things that will help clarify and encourage you to utilize the existing city codes to support the development of a safe and fair way to bring this lot into a housing. A little history and why there's a lot of confusion that we probably didn't make that clear a couple years ago. At the urging of an ad hoc group in the neighborhood, this area was a dirt gravel road, and we were able to get grindings placed on Cherry Street all the way up the hill, and Residence Street, and even the lower portion of Sunset Drive, which was not yet paved. But unfortunately, the installment of this paving, particularly on the west part of Residence, covered a portion of private property of 2 lots adjacent to the alleyway. And this confusion has reigned for some time. So if you use this view that I've given to you there, the orange line where we have a definition of right in that corner and along here, you can visualize a point that I'm going to show you in this lower picture looking east. So a number of us in the neighborhood put these little barriers out about a week ago where we measured off the property. So we're looking east at that point of the arrow and showing you that on the left of that picture is actually private property, and you can see a chalk line down there, and the alley is over to the right side, and it's not even 20 feet at this point. And I think Rebecca Couch pointed some of that out, but we've been trying to explain to everyone the situation that occurred, and it was actually an error, and we didn't tell the city to dig it up after it got out there. So my points in opposition to this variance are that we actually have 3 lots of consideration. If you look at the property lines, there's 2 lots that are undeveloped in addition to the property in question. All of those have an easement onto this supposed alleyway. And because of that, we have major issues. It's not a case of just a variance for one alleyway to go to one place. What's going to happen with the other 2 properties if they are chosen to be developed? So I would stand in disagreement to some of the statements that have been made about the safety of the access and the egress up there. Just a few weeks ago, we had a case where an infant almost drowned, and the fire trucks and safety people and police came up the hill, and they were very confused how to egress and how to turn around, and it was very, very difficult for them. In addition, I asked a question of how are we going to deal with snow issues, plowing an alleyway. If the owners decide to fence this area that was inadvertently paved, then that will truly restrict the access. And one of the other neighbors has some comments to make tonight on the trash removal, and we object to the findings because we don't think it's possible to provide trash removal with the existing situation. Here's another picture to show you if you were going to have the access only via the alleyway, then parking would have to be restricted ahead of that alley, and if you can see again, to the right, the private property is paved, and to the left, we have a very low clearance with the trees beyond that one truck that's there. So I'm going to propose a couple of alternatives for you to think about tonight. One is similar to what we recommended a couple of years ago, to extend Residence Street as a true street so that the 3 lots in question will have adequate access and be formally brought in without a major variance. We're suggesting a 30-foot right-of-way, which has been done in a number of neighborhoods, and then follow the setbacks and requirements for development after that. Another alternative that I think is more obvious to the developers is that there's a much shorter access to this property from C Street using the existing alleyway that actually one of them is 30 foot wide and the other is 20. And so I'm proposing this as an alternative to considering developing off of Residence Street. And there's a lot of reasons for that because of the traffic, the access to the whole Residence Street community is only via Cherry Street right now, and that is a problem with safety and all the aspects of getting in and out of that neighborhood. So I think those are my only points. We have some other neighbors here that are going to point out some more details about this issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Was there anybody else who wanted to speak in favor of this application? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Nathaniel Ely. I live at 318 South Howard. And just wanted to briefly speak in favor of the application. I know the stories personally, but I have no fiscal interest in this project otherwise. And I just want to attest to their character and intent in the development, that they do want to use it to house their family and also to help offset some of the costs of development, that they do have a keen eye on trying to preserve the neighborhood and keep portions of the field that have trees and plants how they are, and that they've also talked with me as a contractor on other projects with the specific intent of preserving the neighborhood. So just a character reference for them and their intent.
Thank you.
That's it. Yep.
Anybody else in favor of this application? Please come forward.
My name is Matt Gravel, and I live at 834 West C Street. And I've lived there for over 15 years, and my family has had that property since 1970 or 1971, so we've always had that house in the family. The house is to the south of this property, and it's on that steep alleyway there. And you mentioned that would be an alternative route. And I would say that it probably wouldn't be an alternative route just because of the steepness of that slope. It's probably a 15% slope or more. And the cost of development would probably be, the city would probably have to buy the property from our family in order to develop it because it's so wide. And that property, the alley, has been so narrow that property has really used part of that alleyway for parking for this house that I live in now. So that could be an issue for the city if that happened. I've known my neighbors since they moved in. They've been great neighbors. And I don't have, my understanding of this whole thing is that it's basically a single dwelling versus a single family dwelling versus a two-family dwelling. And I don't have any problem if it's going to be a two-family dwelling. That's basically all I have to say.
Thank you very
Thank
much. Anybody else in favor of this application? Okay, now we'll turn the time over to other testimony. So please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Clancy Potratz. I live at 425 Sunset Drive. My wife is Barbara Potratz. She's in attendance here as well. I don't like your maps because my hand shakes too much. So I made my own map, and I claim it's even better than yours. This is Sunset Drive. Here's Resident Street. Here's the property in question. This is where I live. This is where I used to live. Chris lives there now. Notice that I have very artistically put in houses. These are all single-family houses except these three. They are duplexes. 80% of the houses in the neighborhood are single-family dwellings. I want to call your attention to the fire marshal's report that was in on the website. The fire marshal report states that the alley shall have an unobstructed width of not less than 20 feet, exclusive of shoulders, and an unobstructed vertical clearance of less than 13.6 feet, or 13.5 feet. And it has to be paid. The marshal's report, fire marshal's report, supports the request, except it adds the caveat, as long as it meets the requirements. That is, the requirements of width, height problems, and paving. So it's really up to you. They didn't say that it met the requirements. As long as it does, they support it. So it's really up to you to decide if it meets the requirements. I wanted to find out exactly where Suzanne Lashbrook, who lives right here, where her property ends and abuts the alleyway. So I went back to this spot on the boundary. I happen to know that spot because I owned that house, and I put in a post, a fence post, right next to a rebar that was part of the survey. I took my scale and measured from that point straight out in this direction until I got 131.3 feet, which was the length of her property, and I put an X. Then I went into the up to the house, and I had Suzanne come down to see where the end of her property was in by the alley. Well, she was surprised there was that far in, that there was that much pavement on her property. She knew there was a lot, but she didn't know it's quite that much. And she said, well, you know, there is a rebar and a mark up by the garage. So we went up there and looked underneath the bushes, and there's a square post, concrete post, with a rebar sticking in it. I took my scale, put it on the rebar, marked off 40 feet. I came within 2 inches of the distance I had done before. So this distance, north and south, is very, very accurate, I would say. I took my scale then, my measure, and I marked across the alleyway. At 14.6 feet, there's an obstruction. Turns out there's a cluster of mailboxes there, built in a metal framework and, fastened to the ground. 2 feet later or so, in fact, 16.9 inches, you get a telephone or a power pole. That's at about 17 feet. You go beyond that to 20 feet, and it's right in the middle of about a 16-inch tree. The requirements say it has to be 20 feet, no less than 20 feet. Neither one of those measurements I got is 20 feet. So the alleyway fails to meet the requirements of the fire marshal at the beginning of the alleyway. If you go beyond, well, there's another tree there. I forgot the vertical. The vertical measurements aren't met either because there's a big tree there. You can't drive a big truck underneath it. There's another tree on the other side of this, by the way, is a garage. On the other side of the garage, there's another tree. So the vertical height doesn't make it. It has to be paved to beyond where the driveway comes, the new driveway. That's someplace out here, according to the map. If you look on that map, you'll see that there is another power pole. That power pole is in the right-of-way. The Vista does not put power poles any place but the right-of-way if they can get by with it, because otherwise they have to get easements. So it's in the alleyway. So that reduces the width of the alleyway there to 17 feet, which is not 20. If you go across 17 feet to where the northern part of the alleyway would be, there are guy wires that come down from the power pole. They're only about 3 feet at the level of the alleyway. But to get there, you have to drop down. To get to the north end, you have to drop down. But there's still the height requirement is not met there either. So this alleyway does not fulfill the requirements of the fire marshal. Okay, it has to be a fire lane, and it doesn't meet those requirements. Also, the paving is a bit of a problem too, because although there might be 20 feet of paving here in this area, half of it, more than half of it, isn't even on the alley. One problem with fire lanes is there can't be any parking. So no place along here can you park. This is a garage, but it's also apartment underneath. The people underneath there very often park in the apron of the garage. They pull their car up to the door. There's only 15 feet setback there. If you have a car longer than 15 feet, for sure if you had a regular pickup truck, it would butt into the alley, and that's not allowed. You can't have any obstruction in the alley if it's going to be a fire lane. The same situation could occur here. Also right there, at the moment, there is a RV, a motorhome. It sticks 5.5 feet into the alleyway. It sticks into the alleyway as much as the mailboxes do at the other end. So if you have a fire lane, it's going to make parking very, very difficult for some of these folks here that depend on it. Okay? One other question, one other point that Chris brought up too, but you can see it here on the map. If you make this a fire lane, then you can't let the people in this duplex park on the street. Because the only way a truck will be able to get over the alley would be to drive across the fence post that Suzanne is going to put up there. You have to have an approach to that. So you have to have no parking, at least in front of this duplex. Already the duplexes have tight parking because when they went in, they only had to have one parking place per unit. Completely outdated in this age. Let me give you an anecdote. This morning, I spent almost 3 hours waiting for the garbage truck. I was underneath an apple tree on Suzanne's property right here. We have 3 posts up there marking the boundaries of the properties. I wanted to talk to the driver of the garbage truck. So I waited there, and finally he came, and he drove across into Suzanne's property to pick up Suzanne's garbage can that was here. He was on the north side of that first white post that we had sticking up. So I went over to him, a very nice kid, and said, I wanted to explain what these posts are doing. I said, we put the posts up there so we could get the folks from the city to come up and see how much the alleyway has sloughed off into private property. So I said, I want to ask you one question. He said, sure. He said, if you have to go pick up that garbage this morning and be on the south side of those 3 posts, can you do it? He says, no way. So I said, I'll take posts down. So he backed his garbage truck up, went up, delivered here, or picked up there, came back down. He has to turn north or east onto residence, then backed all the way up into the alley to pick up the garbage cans that are on the right-hand side of that road. One last thing. This 30-foot right-of-way on the map looks like a reasonable access. It's steep, but there are a lot of other places that are steep. That could be one possibility to have access to that lot. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea because it ignores the problem that these 2 people have. This is not a unique problem that these people have on that lot. These 2 people don't have any access either, frontal access to a road. So what are you going to do with them? They're going to be here to find out how they can get a building permit. The best solution is to add 10 feet to this, make it a 30-foot road down to C Street. It would provide enough space so that people could drive back and forth on it. There wouldn't be much traffic because there's no reason to take that shortcut like there would be some other places. It's a very reasonable thing to do. And I would recommend that the city appoint somebody, some nice arbitrator, that can get together with all the property owners of these 3 lots, get together with Vista. Vista is very much part of that. They almost ruined that corner lot, that back lot, because of the guy wires. There are ways to take care of guy wires. You can put another post in, go over a road. That's one possibility. You might even, if I can get this right here, the post here is particularly bad because the guy wires go right into where you want to park the cars. If you'd have a Vista move the post back to the property line, at least the guy wires going north are going to have a better chance of being out of the way for at least this lot here. And there might be other things that Vista could do. Move the telephone post back so that the guy wires are a different angle. But they should be a part of this. The city should be a part of that. And I think with some give and take, you could come up with a very nice street that would work for those 3 lots. Those lots are fantastic lots to build on. You have a view of the sunset off towards the northwest in the summertime. They're isolated. They're very prime lots for single family homes. Might even note this, that I get my picture right again. Since you could have a sunset from these 3 lots as well as we have up here, we would even call it Sunset Drive 2, TOO. Thank you very much.
Anybody else who'd like to come up and speak?
I'm Chuck Hozak. I live in Coeur d'Alene, 1020 Mountain, and I'm the owner of the west half of Lot 3, which is adjacent to the subject parcel. I grew up in 820 West C Street. My family has owned that property since before I was born, and the alley's always been there, but this lot never really existed. In my mind, it was just all one lot out to the city limits. After my parents passed and we sold the property a few years ago, I held on to the west half of Lot 3 for sentimental purposes, which is probably not a real good reason to own property. But at any rate, that's the situation that I have, and the comments are therefore directed as an adjoining owner to the subject parcel. The only reason I'm here is because of the changes from the prior application. The Otness family had owned their parcel, the subject parcel, for longer than my family had owned our property. It dated back to, I guess, the early homesteaders. And when he needed to sell it, because of the evolution of zoning changes, he didn't have the frontage, and as I understood it, he was asking for a single-family resident, which was the minimum he could ask for. And what else could he do? Because he didn't have a buildable lot. And frankly, I just assumed it never was developed, but I didn't oppose it because there were good reasons that he was making to get it so it could be buildable, and it seemed like a reasonable approach. That presented a problem because the issue for those of you who've never lived at the end of an dead-end alleyway, it causes problems. I can remember as a kid, college students who would park up here for whatever reasons at the end, and this has historically always been the end of the alleyway. They'd park there, and then when they turned around to drive away, they'd get stuck, and it was before cell phones, so they'd come down and knock on the door so they could use the phone and call for help. Not a big deal, but that's the kind of thing that happens when you're on a dead-end alley. People have public access to it, they get there, and then they do things. Since I held on to the west half of the lot after I sold 820, it's just kind of been a chronic underlying current of difficulties. There's trailers parked there, cars parked there. I've been unable to drive onto my lot at times because there's so many cars parked in the alleyway and on my lot. Of course, it's a vacant lot, and so as the staff says, no injury, and that's true. Okay, so I can't get there. Well, I can park my car in the alleyway and walk on. But the point is that, and I've talked to the city police department. They're very understanding. They've been very cooperative. But as they point out, they've got a lot to do, and cars come and cars go. It's just a problem. And the west end of residence, my problems are nothing compared to Mrs. Lashbrook, who's right at the west end of residence. As was pointed out earlier, this garage does have living quarters underneath it. Also, both these houses, our house and our old house and the house next door, are served by an alley, by a private drive that comes down here. So basically, the vehicle access for these houses on C Street is basically off the residence alley. You just have a lot of cars in that area. Adding a single-family residence on the Otness, or what I call the Otness parcel, wasn't a good thing. It's compounded, but it's what's the city going to do? I mean, the alleyway is not a mistake. My dad has a picture of about World War I, and there's two houses in that. The Highlands View addition, our house and the house to the east of it, and that's where Residence Street ends and where the alley begins. So for 100 years ago, they put an alley in there. Who knows? I guess they didn't want a street behind their house, which I guess makes some sense. But the end result is you end up with a difficult situation. It's just not a good situation. And that's why I didn't oppose the Ottness application. Single family, makes it buildable. It's a problem for my lot, but so what? You got to move forward. This application is not that. It's for a duplex. I realize now it's called, what is it, single two-family units rather than duplexes, but it's a duplex. I'm old school. To me, it's a duplex. And it's not a single-family residence. The whole deal was it's a single-family residence, and the whole point of the variance is to waive the street frontage so you don't have an unbuildable lot. The duplex doesn't do anything about making this lot buildable or unbuildable. The lot's a buildable lot. And the request for a duplex is simply, well, we bought a single-family unit, piece of ground, we want more. Now, the applicants sound like very nice people, and it sounds like they have a great plan, and I don't mean to be, don't want to sound impolite, but the point is that this is not the Ottness family that held the ground for 100 years and watched zoning change and came in and asked for a single-family unit so they could have a buildable lot. This is somebody who bought a buildable lot and now wants a duplex. And adding a duplex at the end of a dead-end alley is going to create burdens on my property. It just is. This idea that all these trucks are going to drive in to the far end and then back out down, 118 feet of 20 feet wide alleyway is, I don't know, it's kind of I guess it could happen, but it isn't really human nature. And a single family, I mean, that's one family, that's one set of cars. A duplex is two families and two sets of cars. There's a duplex, I live in Coeur d'Alene, there's a duplex on one side of me, and there's a single-family residence on the other side. There's a whole lot more people, and there's a whole lot more vehicles in the duplex than there is in the single-family residence. It makes a difference, a big difference. And it doesn't accomplish anything as far as the variance is concerned. It's a buildable lot. I'm not here saying that you need to do this, that, and the other thing. It's a bad situation. The city's got to make do with what they, and you've done that. It's a buildable lot. They can build a house there with a view of Kamiakin and out over the west to Palouse. So after Bob Peterson builds his subdivision, it won't be quite as bucolic, but it'll still be. They've got what the variance would be designed to do, which is to move a piece of ground that, for reasons through no fault of the owner, became unbuildable. He got that, and he got it by a request for a single-family residence. And now we have a new applicant saying, I'd like to make it investment property, and I need a duplex. And basically, the staff report says there's no difference between a duplex and a single-family unit. That this is just the same as a flagpole access. The only difference is between a private driveway and a public alley. Isn't that why we're here? It's because it is a public alley. That's the whole deal. And then it's decided, well, that's the only difference, so why don't we just go ahead and grant it anyway? So from my standpoint, I don't hate to be anti-progress, and I certainly don't mean to be obstructionist, but it just seems to me that this is a fairly unique situation. The original owner came with a best scenario solution. The city worked with him, gave him that, and now here we are again. And I don't see it from my standpoint. Obviously, I got a biased perspective, but that's the point of view I wanted to express. So thank you very much.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this variance? Okay. If there's no other comments, and the applicant, you're certainly welcome to...
Yes, may I
Please.
Thank you.
Mark, I did have the one more.
Oh, there is one other. Give us just a moment. We have one other. We had a late submission. And,
very good.
We'll listen to that.
I'm going to have Ann hand those out to you as there is another map to look at. So this public comment was received just today, and if they don't meet the deadline of submitting it to the board, then what we do is we ask the board if they'd like to accept the public comment for review tonight.
We'll go ahead and accept it.
So I'm just going to go ahead and read that. Thanks for discussing the issue with me this afternoon. I realize that the deadline for getting comments into the board's packet has passed, but hope that they will accept this late submittal. I spoke with my tenants at 820 West C, and they did not receive the notice, and my request was to have notices affecting my property sent to my mailing address. Notwithstanding the city attorney's opinion on the noticing procedures, I think the city would be well served to err on the side of caution and inclusion in noticing land use actions. If the variance is granted, I have two requests, illustrated on the attached red line of the proponent's site plan. The end of new pavement should be extended to allow cars parked in the westernmost spaces to turn around before heading east on the extended alley. Otherwise, drivers might be inclined to back out to the nearest driveway and use one of our properties to turn around. At the same time, the south edge of the new alley pavement could be radiused toward the parking pad, avoiding the utility pole and resulting in virtually the same amount of overall pavement. And secondly, I believe the existing pavement on the Residence Street alley does not extend as far west as shown. In any case, I request that the owners along the new pavement area be noticed and given the opportunity to inspect the area to be paved once it has been surveyed and staked, in order to coordinate the paving with the driveways and aprons on their properties. I support the recommended conditions, including the new one you described on the phone this afternoon. Best regards, Dave Boyd.
Okay. Mr. Story, go ahead. Did you?
I would like to make a comment in support of Dave's.
Please come forward. We need your name and your address.
Okay. My name is Francesca Moldenhauer. I live at 820 West C Street, and I'm one of the tenants that Dave was referring to. And my concern is that if there's a duplex across the way from where our driveway is for the garage, that when whoever rents there is having visitors, having a party and might have more than 4 cars that are proposed in that parking space that's going to be in front of the duplex, that they will use our driveway for parking. And we have had this happen in the past. And then we've had to go hunting down the owners of the cars who are parking in our driveway so we could get our car out of the garage. So I just think that this would create, knowing human nature and how people, because the parking situation up there is so congested, I'm thinking that this is going to happen all over again. It's just going to be, a continuation of what we've experienced in the past there. So that's all I have to say. I'm in support of Dave's thing about having a turnaround. I was also in support of the proposition of having an extension on Residence through that, going down to C Street, heading west to that, turn that alleyway into a through road. I think that would be a great idea. I think that would alleviate a lot of the congestion that's already up there. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Story, we'll turn the time back to you.
I appreciate, again, the opportunity to speak publicly regarding this variance, and I also very much appreciate the public forum with which to do that. It is good to know your neighbors, and it's good to hear concerns regarding a neighborhood addressed publicly. I think it's worthwhile for us to continue to speak regarding the Residence Street and Sunset Drive area so as to continue its neighborly feel. I'd like to, first off, again, just redress. I want to reiterate that the city has already inspected this, has had city employees that are entrusted with compliance to the code to come to the property and look at it. the fire marshal, the city engineer, and others have been on site, have looked at this property, and have said that our site plan is appropriate for the current situations there. And I appreciate the professional opinion. I don't think it negates the opinion or the expressed concerns of the neighborhood. Obviously, you're hearing concerns that are addressed regarding parking. Parking is an issue on West Residence Street. However, the parking issues come up not as a result of the property that we're discussing here tonight, but a whole host of other issues. An inappropriately paved private area that belongs to people on the north side, inappropriate placement of mailboxes, allowed growth of trees, lack of enforcement for the parking situation, and particularly a lack of compliance. There's a number of compliance issues on that. I would like to see those addressed. This area coming to the property that we're discussing, I want to have proper access. 17 feet is not appropriate. I'd like to see that properly maintained and addressed, just like any alleyway would be. Our site allows for that appropriate extension of the 20-foot, and we think that's appropriate. There are many, many situations in the city that have a similar dead-end alley, and I think that that's a reasonable consideration for the very small neighborhood that this is. I'd also like to address the consideration that has been raised regarding extending this alleyway or taking a different approach up to the property. First off, this portion of the property only is buildable on the very southwest corner. Because of that, the site map that we've included for you to look at is closest to the end of Residence Street. It is very far from C Street. There's a good reason. The property drops off tremendously from Residence C down to C Street. If you were to visit the site, which I'd encourage you to do, it's a walking path. It's a walking path quite obstructed with Avista poles that carry some high transmission wires. It's a walking path that ends in a very small and curbed alleyway, an alleyway that south of it, as you cross C Street down towards A Street, has been abandoned by the city and purchased by the. It is not hasn't been a through street in a very long time and hasn't been used in that manner. I would be very hesitant, and you've also heard from my neighbor Maddie, to extend that. In our neighborhood, we have several areas where access occurs at the very end of C Street. People use the one-way to sneak up the hill. We have a number of traffic issues. Right now we have a very large access coming up Cherry Street. It's recognized as an arterial in how wide it is, in that it has no stop signs going up the hill. It continues unabated onto Residence Street, allowing very free flow of access. I would be very hesitant to add a new traffic pattern that would bring people down through my backyard. I would also be very hesitant to see my neighbor lose his house, because I believe that's what would happen if you had to extend that and widen it. Thank you for your consideration. We want to be good neighbors, and we appreciate hearing from them. We believe that building is in the best interests of this neighborhood. We're asking for a duplex because we think it would be a very good plan and continue much of the flavor of this neighborhood. It is an R3 zone, which is what all the lots are on either side of us. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Well, we will go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and talk amongst the board. Marshall.
I just want to make a few comments. A lot of good testimony on both sides, and I appreciate that. Very clear and to the point. I think this is a little bit of a unique situation. However, there are other lots, including duplex lots throughout the city, that have similar situations that access by the alley. And there are many, many cases where a portion of the duplex, one unit or another, is accessed by the alley. So the alley access doesn't really upset me. I think the property, I know the property is zoned correctly, and I know the property has adequate lot size for the duplex. And I've always felt that a person should be able to utilize their property in the best means possible, as long as they met all the setbacks and met all the criteria that was put in front of them. The problem comes with the bad situation up there at the end of this alleyway. And even if this variance is turned down, that bad situation still exists. I mean, every criteria that Mr. Potras said is absolutely correct. It's difficult for garbage trucks to get there. It doesn't meet the criteria for the fire department. And that doesn't change if this variance is denied. That problem still exists. And it seems to me that whether we okay this variance or deny this variance, that the problem up there needs to be addressed. And I think that the city should step forward and analyze it and work with the neighbors to address the problems up there. So I guess I'm inclined, because it's zoned correctly and there's adequate lot frontage up there, is to grant the variance with the conditions that staff recommended. But I also think it's very important that the city step in to help alleviate those problems up there.
Thank you.
I have to say that I agree with about 60% of what Marshall said. The other 40% I do not agree with. The 60% that I agree with is that the city bears some responsibility here in dealing with that neighborhood and the problem of what to do with Residence Street and C Street and how you get from A to B, depending upon where A and B are. The problem that we have here is that this is a request for a variance, and the variance is based upon not having the appropriate city, the appropriate street access. And in this situation, the concern that I have is that allowing a duplex there is just unacceptable, just not on. And I'll tell you exactly why. The existing owners of the property intend for their parents to live there and then to rent out the other part so that they can make the whole thing work financially. I appreciate those needs. I really do. I'm hoping that my son will be as interested in my welfare as you are in your parents. But in this situation, let's assume that this is granted, and God forbid, let's say that your parents pass away. Well, you now have a duplex, and I doubt that you are going to move from your existing home to the duplex, but I don't know. And even if you do, it still has yet another place for parking and sanitary service and all of the rest of the things that we've been talking about tonight. I think that a duplex on this particular property with its limited access is just unconscionable. And I look at where the proposed extra spaces are, and I immediately see in my mind's eye a bunch of potential garbage containers kind of creeping over into that area, and various other things that would be really unacceptable for the neighborhood and unacceptable even for the duplex residents. So I think that a single-family house, especially noting Mr. Potratz's very, very good observation that this is a gorgeous piece of property. This has a view out to Gazoo and Wazoo, for that matter. It is a beautiful piece of property, and that would be a tremendous site for a really prime single-family home. I do believe that before any variance is granted, that the city needs to address this problem of the width of this area, where the pavement ends, where it doesn't end, what is the area associated with the needs of the fire department and the needs of the sanitary sewer and other, or the sanitary facilities. And it also seems to me that we have this obligation as the Board of Adjustment to wait until that problem has been fully addressed and not to grant this variance now, possibly not ever for a duplex. A single-family home, I can swallow that one, but a duplex, no.
Marshall? Oh, I just want to clarify a couple of things, and maybe, Becky, I'll have you ask you a question here in a minute. To me, the number of cars, whether it's a duplex or a single-family dwelling, is irrelevant, because the off-street parking standards for a duplex is much more stringent than they are for a single-family residence. I think for a single-family residence, it says what, a minimum of 2 spaces, and for a duplex, it's based on at least 2 spaces or the number of bedrooms, 1 space per each bedroom. Is that correct?
It is just 2 per dwelling unit for the duplex as well. That the one per bedroom is only if it's located on a collector street.
Okay.
So this one is not. So it's just 2 per unit.
But no matter what, they would have to meet the off-street parking requirements. Yes. So, okay. Okay.
Mark?
Well, I have anxieties with the duplex as well, but I also have some questions, and that is, what are the requirements for parking or not parking in an alley? In a 20-foot alleyway, would that be assigned as a no parking space?
It certainly could be. Yeah, there's no parking allowed within a public right-of-way within the alley.
Within the alley, it's not allowed at the moment. Okay. Right. And I'm sure with a professional survey and map showing locations of power poles and trees and people's property lines as they work with their house locations, that's a given for a building permit. Requirements for overhead is a given. And whether that's met by a vista or not with its guide towers, and whether the tree trimming happens or not, that's all within the building department's requirement.
That's correct, yep. And that was the reason for the added third condition, was to, at the time that a building permit was pulled, the applicant would have to ensure that that 20-foot width is there. And then I would also just add that the land was plotted with a 20-foot right-of-way, so the 20 feet is there somewhere.
And it's a clear 20-foot passageway that can't have cars parking on the side of it.
Cannot have cars parking on the side of it.
Right. I think Dave Boyd's letter that we received today makes sense. Dave is an architect in Seattle. His family lives at the end of the alley on what is west of 820 West C, I think. And this seems a reasonable solution by him to have a backup space out of the proposed building so that cars don't have to back out of the alley. And again, I think a duplex is probably just asking for trouble. If there's a party, it's going to be full of cars. And so at this time, I think we don't need to provide this variance, that it would work as a single-family house much better.
Thank you, Mark. I've listened to this as well, and I was here when we went through it a couple of years ago, and seem to recall that part of the reason it got denied is we didn't have the applicant here we just didn't have a lot of information, and it was clear back then that this is a difficult piece of property to work with. I agree with Linda, and I agree with Marshall, in the sense that the parking, I think, the parking problem is going to exist no matter what we do. I agree with Marshall's comment that if it's a duplex, there's going to have to be adequate off-street parking. I agree with Mark's comment and Linda that this is expanded a little bit than what was contemplated before. I'm listening to the testimony, and Mr. Potratz, if he's correct and his measurements are correct, I don't know that this will work no matter what we do. If there's not enough space, there's not enough space, and I think that's the purpose of that third condition that was put on there today. In order for this to be approved, it needs to work, and that's going to be the case, I think, whether it's a single family or whether it's a duplex. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I agree that the city bears some responsibility here. It would be nice to have that, but yeah, I'm also listening. It seems like parking comes up all the time. One could make the argument if it's a single-family residence, if there's a party, there's going to be 100 cars there, whether there's a single family where there's a duplex. We can't control bad decisions of people. I don't know that we can do that. Well, certainly we can't do it sitting here right now, but the only concern I have related, when I looked at this, I looked and I thought, well, okay, we've been through the process. We denied it. It went in front of the city council. It was approved. I was looking through the minutes that was provided to us as far as the historical context. I remember the discussion we had earlier, and Jerry Long, who's not here tonight, I remember him saying this is exactly the situation that we have placed in front of us for the approval of a variance, and which is interesting because Jerry is a guy that I have yet to see him in favor of a variance ever, except for this one last time. And then he, interestingly enough, he abstained from the vote. That was interesting, too. But, again, I think whether we're dealing with a duplex or whether we're dealing with a single-family housing, we're dealing with the same issues no matter what.
I think it makes a great deal of difference whether we're dealing with a duplex or a single family for all the reasons I stated before. And so in order to get this off the dime, I would move that we deny this variance and that we ask the city to address the issues as to whether this is even possible with the even a single family home, which is something that I wouldn't have an objection to, but that's not before us. The proposal before us, I would like to, I'm moving that we deny that and request that the city address the issues that were brought up concerning the access for a 20-foot alley, whether that can be done, whether the many incursions can be taken care of, whether the paving on the private properties adjacent to this have been factored into this, and all of the other comments that were very well raised by everyone from the folks who spoke against this project.
Let me ask this. In times past, we have been able to, I don't want to say table, but I'll say table. I'll use the term table in order to gather more information, and I think that's essentially what you're denying right now. And then
it is not. Let me clarify what I'm doing. I am not in favor now, tomorrow, next week, 3 weeks from now, or next year of a duplex in that particular site, because of the terrain and the adjacent land uses and the character of the neighborhood and a variety of other things. So this project that has been brought to us, which is the one that's in front of us, I can't support. If they were to redo their project and say, we'd like to have a single-family home there, I'd be the first one with my pom-poms saying, yay, hooray. As long as the city tells us that, yes, these matters can be taken care of within a 20-foot right-of-way to that site. So,
If I may, I just wanted to comment and make sure that the board understands that the previous variance has expired.
oh, I understand that.
Okay, and then that if this one was denied, they no longer have the right to build the single
I
family.
understand all of that. They'd have to
wanted
come back
mention-
to us with a new proposal.
And then also just clarifying that the variance request is just from the public street frontage requirement, so therefore there could be a condition to only allow a single-family dwelling. Even though they are requesting a two-family dwelling, the variance is just from the public street frontage. They could be allowed to waive the requirement permitting a single-family dwelling only. Just a comment. And then also just to address the condition of the applicant demonstrating that the 20 feet width is there would be done at the time of the building permit. And then additionally, with that condition, we stated that any necessary improvements needed to be made to make sure there is 20 feet, the applicant would be required to do. And if they could not do that, the building permit would not be issued, even with the variance approved. So,
Well, even though my motion is sitting out there dying, let me just address this, Rebecca. It seems to me that the city has some responsibility here to address the issue of access in that area, and that's what I was addressing. And the fact that, you know, we could put a strong provision of approval on this in the event that such and such were the case. It seems to me that for everybody, including the city and the applicant, it would be a very good idea to know whether that's feasible or not. And that's why I addressed the motion in the way that I did.
Well, there's a motion out there.
And the motion again is...
Simply deny it.
Simply deny it, and then the applicant has the ability to build a single-family residence without coming before the board again.
That variance expired, so that would, I presume they would have to come back and
For
reapply.
renewal, reapplication. And then the other possibility is that the applicant would come back with a better professional survey site plan showing that things are possible up there.
Well, they could do it. I think the city has some responsibility here to address the issues that have been raised. The paving question, which is not, I think, the applicant's problem at all. It's the city's issue, but it involves the adjacent property. So that's why I would like the city engineering department and the planning department to sit down with the evidence that was brought forth tonight and to analyze that and to provide a short analysis of whether this is possible.
But they may not find it necessary to do that if it was not given as a possibility by the board tonight. I mean, they're not even going to consider the duplex possibility because we would have denied that.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, I don't see what good it's going to do to deny the applicant the possibility of doing their duplex. Fine, they can reapply with better information. Maybe the city staff will work with them, helping to find that out. Given that all those are part of it, I guess I would have to approve of your
request?
I'll tell you, I'll make it a lot simpler. I'll just move that we deny the application for a variance that's in front of us. Forget about the city right now.
Okay.
Okay, what?
Okay, I'll go along with that.
Does that mean you're seconding it?
Oh, yes.
Okay, well, I'd like to point out that only the city has the ability to move the obstructions. The applicant doesn't. It's on right-of-way that the city owns, and any of those obstructions, the city is the only one that has the ability to move those obstructions. And I guess what I'm saying is if the applicant works with the city to move the obstructions and meet the criteria and the conditions that are placed in front of us, does the problem go away?
Not for a duplex.
And because you're thinking a duplex has more cars than a single-family residence?
Not just more cars. Marshall, it's not more cars. It's the quality of the neighborhood, the all of the adjacent, the predominant use in that area is single family. And yes, there are some duplexes down the hill, but the fact is that getting up to Sunset Drive and Residence and using the Cherry Street Hill, the only way that you can really get up that hill, period, during most of the year, that just doesn't seem to be a really
So what you're
good
saying
alternative.
it's a car issue?
It's two issues. One is street availability, and that isn't a street, and the way that it's laid out is not amenable to being a street at the present time. And the second part is cars and congestion, and the third issue is the character of the neighborhood. So those are the three that I think are the reasons why you should join me in supporting my motion.
I'm afraid I can't do that, Linda. I think that the zoning is correct. The character of the neighborhood is a mixed neighborhood, and I'm all in favor of improving the neighborhood. The neighbors all in favor of improving the neighborhood, and and from what I'm hearing you say, you don't even want a single-family residence there.
No, I said I would support a single-family residence. I'd be the first one with the pom-poms. Remember my pom-pom comment? I'd be the first one making the cheers for the single-family place. In fact, well, let's not talk about, I'm not moving from A and Jefferson, but if I were to, that would be a fabulous place to live.
Well, a person could build, if we approved a variance request for a single-family residence, they could build a 10-bedroom house and have 10 kids that all drive.
Good luck to them.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is it's not a parking issue or a car issue, because a single-family residence could have more than a duplex.
In theory, yes. In likelihood, no. The average, well, I'm not going to go into demographics of the city of Moscow, but, that's simply not reasonable.
Well, let's vote.
Yeah.
The motion is to deny the variance in front of us at this time. And it's been seconded by Mark.
It's been seconded by me.
Linda's obviously in favor.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
I agree with Marshall. I've got to side with Marshall on this one. I looking at it, so not sure what we do when we have a tie.
It fails because it has a tie.
It fails. Yeah, motion fails.
The one thing I would like to to say to the applicants is, if this were I think I've made it abundantly clear that if this were essentially the request that the city council approved a couple of years ago, that I really would have no problem with it at all. And the tweaks that were suggested tonight, the need to address the traffic flow in that area generally, that really is the city's responsibility. I think you all ought to be on the doorstep of engineering tomorrow morning and saying, now let's see what we're going to do about this. But I think that it would be a fine idea if you would revise, pardon me, if you would revise your plan for that property to single family. It just doesn't fit a duplex, in my opinion.
Go ahead. I guess we're at a stalemate now. We need another motion, which I intend to make. I wanted to ask Becky a question. To accommodate a relative in a single-family home, what options are there, Becky? Like, I mean, in the county we have accessory cottages. Is there any accommodations in the city where you can have a single-family residence with an accessory connected to it to accommodate elderly people?
If it's a separate detached building,
or attached, is there any accommodations for that?
Only. Well, what I was going to say is if it's detached, it would only be allowed if the lot area permits 2 single-family dwellings, because that would be considered a second single-family dwelling. If it's attached and it's part of the same livable unit and they're all related, they can certainly live together. That's a family. Mm-hmm. As long as they meet the definition of a family, they are fine to house a relative.
And how about if it was built as a single-family residence and part of it was rented out?
You are able to rent out a room as long as you continue to meet the definition of family. And so what I believe, I can look it up, but I think it's a family that is all related, and then you can have one additional unrelated person that you would rent a room out to. But let me confirm that.
Well, I'm just going to play the devil's advocate a little bit more. Since it's a large lot, could the lot be divided and still meet the criteria for a single-family lot? To say it's a large lot, they did a lot division, divided the lot, and built 2 houses.
Yes, as long as that lot division was approved. However, they would look at the fact that it doesn't have public street frontage as part of that.
So they'd have to have 2 variances.
Right.
And they'd be back to us. Or one variance addressing that lot and its division.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna try a motion here, and I move that we approve the request for the variance, and that we implement all the conditions considered by staff, including when it comes to the paving issue. I think it needs to be clarified as to what level of paving it needs to be, not a 2-inch parking lot, but up to city street standards. But I want to make it very clear that, and you already have, that before any building permit was issued, all the obstructions need to be removed to meet the fire department criteria.
And I don't know if I can second that as a chair, but if I...
You can't.
I can't second my own motion.
No, you can't.
So it must die by lack of second.
That one's gone.
I think we've done our business tonight.
We need another person.
If I could just make a suggestion, I'd encourage you to look at the 5 criteria that the decision for the variance is based upon. Just a suggestion.
Rebecca, I do that every time. I've looked at those, and that's why I came up with the decision that I I made, and I'd be happy to go over each of those with you afterward, but if we if we need to have findings right now, I'll be happy to offer that now.
It was just a suggestion, as I hadn't heard much discussion about the specific criteria for the variance, but just...
Gee, I thought I had, oddly enough.
Well, I agree with Linda. I don't know that we're going to get anything else accomplished this evening, and I don't know what our options are.
Well, I can move that we have ended this particular item, and we go on to the approval of the minutes.
Is that a motion, or can I make a motion?
It's really the chair's
Go ahead, Marshall.
prerogative.
Well, I would move that we table any decision on this until we have more members available.
But we made a decision.
No, it died. We did not make a decision, in my opinion.
It failed.
No, your motion failed.
No, my motion. Well,
your motion to deny
okay, so you
failed.
want to table this.
Your motion to deny
You want to
failed.
table
My
this.
motion didn't get a second, so I would move that we table it until we have more members available.
And I'm not going to go with that.
I think I can second that one. And I think it would help us to have at least two other members of this board to look at this and possibly allow the submittal of some additional city work.
Information.
Yes.
The only way, excuse me, but the only way that I would support that is if we reopen the public hearing.
I think that's probably a fair...
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. If we get more information, I think we need to reopen that.
Okay, well, so this is Chapter 1, and Chapter 2 is yet to come, and, you know, get all of your information together.
Well, and my reason, I know we've got a motion on the floor, but my reason for the motion is we're at a stalemate. We can't get a motion to approve, we can't get a motion to deny. And as far as fair due process for the applicant and the neighbors, I think that we need to go through a fair due process. And
It's completely fair to do what we have done. The concern that I have is that we are not just kind of opening this up so, well, never mind on that one. I guess I would like to have one thing clarified by Rebecca. Rebecca, would it be possible for the applicant to amend their application to provide for a single-family house rather than a duplex?
They could certainly do that, but...
Between now and whenever we take it up again?
That I do not know. I think if anything on the application has changed, it's going to be a new variance request.
the
That's
only
my
way they could
understanding.
do it, Linda, would be to not go through with this application and reapply.
Right.
Becky's right. Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. I am not sure about that. I would think that the applicant has within his power, it's a little bit like being in court and, you've been had up there for murder one, and you find that, oh, yes, it would be so much better to be had up for manslaughter instead. And so you go for manslaughter.
We call that a lesser included offense.
I know,
Yeah, I've got a motion on the
you
floor.
criminal people, we civil people, we do other things on that. But anyway, but I would like Rebecca to check with the city attorney and communicate the answer that she gets to the applicant so that they know all of their options on this. And then it would need to be, well, wait a minute, would this this reopening of the hearing have to be re-advertised? Okay. So when could this be heard?
It just has to be noticed 48 hours. Oh, that's right.
If it has to be noticed...
The hearing would have to be sent out to adjacent property owners again at least 15 days before the hearing.
Okay, so we're at least 2 or 3 weeks, well, at least 3 weeks away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Motion to table second. Start with you.
I'll vote for it, yes.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes. I'll vote aye as well.
Okay.
So let's approve some minutes and go
Okay,
home.
that sounds like a good idea. We'll move on to the minutes from April 22nd.
I move approval of the minutes from April 22nd, 2014.
I second that,
Okay.
having
Linda?
been here.
Abstain.
I wasn't here either.
2 people are voting yes, and that
Yes and
must
yes,
be
that's
enough.
done.
One half plus one.
Rebecca, anything that we need to be aware of as far as other communications, other business?
Nope, there are no other applications coming in at this time, so
So we expect this will probably, could be the next one we
most
hear.
likely, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Just